You know what that means? It's Latin. Means know thyself. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Being the one is just like being in love. No one can tell you you're in love, you just know it. Through and through. Balls to bones.
I wanted to get on and share a quote that, or at least, I feel like today. Well, first off, let me say this. I think this is how my brain works. Another perception or another thing about myself. I have this hat on. This is my recording hat, and I have this shirt on, and I'm probably gonna buy a couple more, because I don't want to be thinking about what I'm aware every time I do a podcast. It just keeps my mind clear. So it honestly puts me in the mind, because this is new for me. It puts me in the mindset of just, this is my recording shirt, this is my recording hat, and that gives me a little less things to think about. So if you notice, or if you will notice, I'll have this hat on. I may change up the shirt and I may change up the hat, but I try to keep things consistent, at least for this new season, so I can remain consistent. So one of the quotes that I mention a lot, definitely to myself, I say it often. I'm looking at it right now. It says, very simple, it's, Socrates, I know that I know nothing. And every time I don't remember the first time I heard it, but either way, when I think about that, when I process that, I know that I know nothing. And then I remember thinking, like, wait a minute, how could a man who knows so much know nothing? And that bugged me. And there's a verse in the Bible, when Paul in the New Testament, and it says, I know nothing by myself. And that was always interesting to me. Like, what do you mean I know nothing by myself? And obviously we can say, the simple, I think at the time I was thinking, like, his dad didn't teach him, or, he was taught by, because Paul in the Bible, he was extremely intelligent. So that got me. That made me start to think just think, how do I even understand that? And what I started to do, I'll never forget. I think it was right before Daniel was born. He was born in 2008. And I remember saying to myself, like, I got to explore everything so I can understand at least this portion of knowing nothing. What does knowing nothing mean? Knowing that you know nothing. Like, what does that mean? And I started to look at space, stars, and everything, that I could consume on YouTube about galaxies, and God knows everything about the sky that had a lecture. I watched it, and I started to run across things that talked about consciousness. Do we live in a simulation? And this was years ago. So this was, Daniel's 14 now. This is 14, 15 years ago. And that led me to really looking at, I think I came up, or at least heard, wisdom is infinite. It goes on and on and on. And everybody always says, they discuss things and I understand that. And yeah, I understand how to get in the blocks. I understand how to throw a football, and that's so small compared to when we're gazing up at the stars, what we don't really know. And we seek and you shall find, or, like I said, I'm a person of quotes, and I have this, I read this book, The Middle Way. It's a Buddha book, but it showed me so much. I don't not read or study something because one person is upset with it. No, I look at everything because I want to know, because going back to the stars, I started to look at, I think I would talk to Toya. I was like, what's Orion's belt? What is that? And she would point to it, or, the Big Dipper, Little Dipper is what, being from Oklahoma, or being born, from Oklahoma. I would see that. I never really understood it. Can't say I understand it now, but knowing that I know nothing, just opened my mind to other possibilities. I know nothing by myself. Then who teaches you? How does it teach you? And what I've learned and realized is through this, this short time on this planet, we are on a planet. And that's what I always share. And if people who know me, they or have been around me in a conversation, I'm like, we're on a planet. Every person on the planet, there is an end, period. Like, you can't argue that. You can, when I die, we're not arguing where we're going. We're arguing the end. There is an end. Or discussing. We're not arguing at all, but we're discussing. And because there is an end, there was a beginning. And that is a debate, the Big Bang, the big this. And as we get into all that, as I explored, I started to really understand or try to understand consciousness. What makes us conscious? And I was watching a lecture, and this was a while ago, and the guy was talking about, or the professor was saying, or scientist or something. He said, who thinks your thoughts? Like, how do we think? Where do you store your thoughts? Is another one I ran across. Like, whoa, where do we store our thoughts? And in sports, when you get on the field, and I have this story about a good friend, I would call a great friend, actually. And we're at the University of Colorado, and he was, I would say he's a safety when I was there. And we were playing Texas A&M, and I'll never forget. And I was on the sideline. We're on defense, and they had at that time, Texas A&M had a big running back, and it was a swing pass to our sideline. The running back caught the ball, and I kind of glance over to my right, and I see he's the first person that's going to meet this guy, and this guy was a big guy. I want to say he was bigger than our safety, but he definitely wasn't small. And I remember seeing the guy's face, like seeing his eyes, I should say, through the helmet. I see his eyes, and he saw that the safety was coming, and I looked in his eyes, and I said, oh my God, like he's serious. I look over at our safety, and I couldn't see his eyes. His back was kind of turned, but it was within, obviously, in sports, it may be slow motion sometimes on the field or on the track or on the basketball court, but everything was happening so fast, and they met, let's just say, and our safety hit him so hard, he fumbled the ball. And I'm not sure, but I believe we recovered it. Obviously the crowd goes crazy, and I was standing there, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I witnessed something that I actually shared the story with him. So when he sees this, hopefully he laughs. But anyway, I said that Texas A&M running back, and he probably is a great guy, I have nothing, but he believed something. And when you tackled him very forcefully, you were working in the knowing, and you knew, like, you were persuaded you were going to make that tackle. In that moment, it's like, in that moment for me, I was like, I've never understood that next step from believing. Like, it's always, against all hope, I believe in hope. And we always say, I hope I make it. And there's, again, I got to bring out another one. Quote is, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hated that scripture. Didn't understand it. It's like, what are you talking about? Hope is supposed to be great. Believing, do you believe? Yes, I believe. I can't think of what movie I'm thinking about right now, but anyway, belief is a very important thing. It's the next step past hope. In that moment when our safety tackled the running back, I knew there was a knowing. I don't know how I knew that, but I remember thinking he knew he was not going to miss that tackle. And I believe he said at one point, this was years ago, but I pretty sure he had mentioned something about, and if he doesn't remember, I'm pretty sure he said, tackling is just a belief. But then the person behind the belief has to know. And my example of knowing is, or the examples that I can give for knowing is, as we walk this journey, do we know we're doing the right thing? we believe we are, but do we know? And honestly, that was a thought pattern that again, it just starts to bug me, and it starts to get me to that point to where it's like, all right, let me explore everything and try to understand what belief. What I do is I look up the definition of every word, even if it's simple like hope, I look it up, and belief, I look it up. And it always leads me to the thing of like, okay, let me explore this. Let me meditate about this. Let me try tasks or do tasks in my life so I can understand. And sometimes, it's one thing that I've done is I rode a road bike 100 miles, and my system that I had at the time, and I rode like 75 before. I would do 30-mile bike rides. This was back in Delaware, and I would do those things. And I was like, okay, I want to do 100 miles, and me and my wife signed up for a bike ride. It was started in Williamsburg, and you ride to Richmond and then back to Williamsburg, to basically, obviously, the same spot. And it was 50 miles was the halfway point, obviously, but it was the biggest rest stop where you can eat the most food or whatever the case may be. And I did this by myself, and we drove down. We had fun while we were down there in Williamsburg. I believe we stayed, I don't remember exactly where we stayed, maybe a timeshare of my mother-in-law's, or I don't remember. But anyway, so I'm doing the ride, and I remember, and I can break this down even more, if definitely if I start getting questions, but in the moment, I'm still on that belief and knowing pattern. And I believed I could finish it because I've done 75. It's just 25 more. And that's what our mind says, or that's what my mind was saying. And I went out, and obviously I started, and I was by myself, and I was, I have a great time. I don't listen to music when I'm working out. It's just totally me, and whatever I'm around, especially when I'm out. Maybe if I'm lifting weights or I'm in a gym, I listen to music. But if I'm out jogging, running, walking, riding a bike, I don't bring anything because I want my thoughts. I want to explore my own thoughts. But anyway, I remember getting to mile 50, and I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't tired, but I never rode this road before, and it was somewhat hilly, but it wasn't super hilly like here in southern Arizona. But anyway, I did the 50 miles, and I remember I was leaving the stop, and I had ate like maybe 4 or 5 bananas and whatever else they had, drank a ton of water. So in essence, I felt great, but my body was not, I didn't feel like, okay, I just got 50 more. I kind of was like, man, this is going to be interesting. I got to a point to where, and I remember this specifically, I was at mile 72, and both calves were cramping. Both quads had tension in them, not cramps yet. I was riding through a neighborhood somewhere in Virginia, obviously. And I remember just yelling to myself out loud. No one was around on that portion where I was. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like I was basically cussing myself out. And I remember in that moment thinking, let me call my wife. Toya was in Williamsburg. I was somewhere in Virginia, in between leaving Richmond in essence. So I have really no clue. I had no cell phone service. I had nothing. I just had my bike and my body. And I believed that I was like, man, you thought you could do this, and now you're all cramping up. And the beauty about the mind, I knew if I couldn't call her, so that was not an option. So I maybe pedaling as I'm pedaling, trying to make sure I don't cramp up too much, because I had to keep moving. So as I'm pedaling, I started to eliminate what I normally do is eliminate thoughts. Toya's not coming, so shut up. You have one option. You have to keep pedaling. And the next thought that came is, what if I can't? What if I don't make it? And those things, I was like, the lizard brain kicking in. And I'm like, no, you're going to make it because you have no choice. This is your option. Not too long. I think I got to mile 76. So that was a good, 4-mile argument with myself. And it was a dad and a son on the same ride, and they were passing me. And it was like, if anybody ever cycled, it's definitely easier to ride as a group. And the son or the dad said, "Hey, tuck back behind us. You cramping?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I tucked back behind them, and in my cramps, I'm probably going 14, 15 miles an hour. And if anybody, again, cycling, and you have a road bike, the one with the thin tires, averaging 18 to 21 is a lot better than going 14 to 15. But I tucked behind them, and obviously we speed up. And I think at one point I looked down at my watch, and we're up to 23 miles an hour. And in that tucked part behind them, you draft. You get to basically have someone carry some of or a lot of the burden for you. And you have actually two people in front of you. And it makes your life and your ride. And at that time for me, it was my legs. I could at least gain some strength back, as well as gain ground closer to the 100 miles. And that was a moment, and I've done drafting before, but I've never been in that much pain. My brain kicked in, my strength, my knowing kicked in. And I said, "You're good. You're going to make it." So I started to already think about, so you start to create that reality. You start reminding yourself there was a bridge. And I just kept that bridge in my mind, and I just kept pedaling. And we didn't stay with them. I didn't stay with them, for the whole time, but I pretty much stayed with them till I believe 84 or 85 miles. And I remember specifically riding the last 10 by myself. I don't remember exactly where, but I remember the 10 being definitely by myself. And those knowings is when you're pedaling. And at that time I was by myself, mile 93, mile 94. And then you start to feel that creep of unbelief kicking back in. Your legs are starting to feel it, all this stuff. And I said, mile by mile, take the next mile. And that's what I always did, 1 mile. How many miles you do? What mile you on? All that stuff that we could process and think about. But I narrowed the thoughts down to this mile, this moment, the knowing. I believe in the now. And now is more important than what is tomorrow or what's in my past. And I remember just pedaling. And I remember I was on the road towards the end towards the beginning, but I'm headed there, and I'm like, where's that bridge? And then when I started to question it, I started to feel the pain again. So I said, no, you've made it. So you start already putting yourself there. You're like, I made it. And I remember seeing the bridge, and after that, your energy, you start to feel that, you start to pedal faster. I wasn't looking at what mile I was on. I was looking at the finish line. It didn't matter at that point. And that's the knowing when you seek out, or you set out to accomplish something, and the freedom that you get from putting yourself through the pain. There's purpose in pain. And I've always said that. That's not my quote. It's mine right now because I'm saying it, but there's purpose in pain. If you're not, looking for pain, it'll find you. And I'm a strong believer in that. And I'm not saying go out and look like for a fight or for certain, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like I cycle now, I have a road bike. It's a lot bigger and I go a lot slower, but I love it because it puts me in a level of to where I have to push through. Southern Arizona is windy. I can't control the environment of the wind. I'm still working on my peace be still, but I go out and I embrace it. I accept it. Today is the day that I ride. I have a minimum of 10 miles and I just go out and do it no matter what. And when I hit the 10 mile point, Sometimes I go further, sometimes I don't. But when you're at mile 94, I'm just using that number, you came too far to say, or at least I came too far to say no. I wanted to finish that. I wanted to accomplish something. I wanted to, to know that I could finish. I believed I could finish, but the pain brought me to a knowing that I'll have for the rest of my life. So that's where, I am. And these are the things that I want to share is as they come to me, or as, I'm in conversation or different things. I'm just going to just share stories. And as we walk this path of life, as we're all walking, we learn so much about, at least I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for anybody else. I learned so much about myself. And one thing I know about myself that I can say I know is I've had times to where I feel like I've given up, but then I have someone in my life to tell me to keep going. Always. I've always had someone around me, whether it be, honestly, sometimes, people you meet, you can call it angels. It's always been someone on our travels, where I'm at a point. And if I'm out there pushing myself, someone always comes to me with a knowing. And they say, if you got this far, just keep going, because belief took me, but the knowing keeps me. So I've said enough. So until next time. Hey, folks, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Oh, yeah, hit that bell, so you can know more about Swift Sundays.